thing.
Oh
Okay, so welcome to Friday Games and Gambit. This is probably the last one that we're doing this semester. Normally we show other people's games, but today I thought that we'd show one of the games that we did last summer, which is the Slower Speed of Light. This is the entire dev team minus A,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So introductions all around. I'm Philip Tan. I'm the creative director for the lab. I was also the liaison between the student team and the product owner, who was Gerd Kordemeyer from Michigan State University Physics Department. He's not here today. I believe he's grading finals right now. So he was the one who brought the project to us in the first place. Maybe a little bit more about that. Zach, you want to go ahead and we'll go around?
I'm Zach Sharon. I was one of the devs for this summer, and I did mostly GUI and interaction stuff, but a little bit of the engine as well.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I was also another programmer for the project. I did a lot on the engine and the physics part and that stuff like that. I wrote the shader for the game. Yeah. I was also the second artist.
That's a crazy artist situation. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind.
I'm blaming Yay on you.
Oh, I'm eBay. I'm the artist and the designer.
First artist.
Yeah, the first artist.
And I'm Sunny Sidhu. I was a designer and producer on the project.
There's also Steve Shearer, who is off camera, right there, who helped a lot with the publicity and figuring out how we were going to position this name. So before we go into like the questions that we've gotten about this, I thought we'd just show the game, and let me switch to a screen view and start the game again. I was going to show the original game first, for people who may not have seen it.
Oh gosh.
I hope
what is it doing? Full screen probably won't work.
Oh, you know what?
You should start in wizard mode.
Yeah.
If you get seizures.
Sorry about that.
This is before the warning.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Okay, that's actually the wrong screen. I think the screen that I wanted was this screen anyway. So, alright. I'm going to turn on window mode. Alright, window mode, that's good. Make it a little bit smaller. Fantastic. There we go.
Wow.
Oh,
It looks beautiful on the big
yeah.
HD.
I just want to make sure. Yeah, this seems to be working okay. So, slowest speed of light. Actually, Sunny, do you want to describe what the game is?
I can try.
Okay.
Slower Speed of Light is intended to be a demonstration of how
Oh my gosh, science. You don't say that to me. I'm too dumb for this. Like, very the goal
We thought that by way of we wanted a character that was why which has to do with
Go back. What are you collecting?
Oh, okay. We'll show it. We'll show you in the game in a second. There are these giant balls that are
watermelons.
giant watermelon-shaped things that are in the environment right here. And every time you pick up one of these, the speed of light drops. So it comes a little bit closer to your walking speed, although we try to make sure that you never actually reach the speed of light, no matter how low the speed of light actually gets. But the way how acceleration works when you're close to the speed of light is different from standard Newtonian acceleration. And this game actually models that, right?
Yeah.
Yes. It becomes actually harder to, it takes more energy to accelerate. We have a curve in there that makes the game playable, so that your acceleration curve is not entirely like a linear amount of power or else a fixed amount of power, so that you can actually still control the game. Hey, come on in.
Oh yeah, we're
Yeah,
Marcus.
I
There's a
think-
chair, there's a seat over there.
Oh.
I think we use constant power.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly,
Constant something.
I think we honestly
No, we use
just
relatively velocity addition, right?
Yes. So we're adding the same amount of velocity every time, but it's
Right.
slowly becoming less and less. It makes it less and less of an impact as you get closer to the speed of light, because the same amount of added power or velocity to your speed basically doesn't really do as much, because you're approaching the speed of light. It requires a lot more energy to actually get through when you're trying to travel at those speeds.
Right. So I think a lot of people actually miss that we're not just modeling the visual effects, but also some of the kinetic aspects of the speed of light.
Which is why ice skating on banana fields.
Right.
I think if we'd done it a little bit more realistic, we probably would have done constant power or constant or change in energy. But that would have meant that you actually couldn't reach the speed of light, which wouldn't have been a very fun game.
You
couldn't go very fast.
You could barely get anywhere close to it.
Yeah. Well, either that or you could never go anywhere slow.
And you never did, and decelerating would also be pretty hard.
Yeah.
So having any control at all would be hard. Ryan, you ever played?
Sure.
Is these
All right,
controls?
all right.
Let's switch seats.
Let's see. I have a feeling I'll get nowhere. Oh gosh.
Oh gosh.
okay. At the bottom of the screen is usually a bar that shows how much of the light you're seeing. Normally, what you're seeing is very narrow band of visible light, but then as you get closer to the speed of light, you are able to see infrared move into your visible spectra into the visible band. Or if you're moving backwards, you actually see ultraviolet move into your visible band. And there was actually a question about we decide what the infrared and ultraviolet features that we want to so the ultraviolet was mostly just a line, really. We came up with something that maybe was look nice, and we also coded beamformers in both IR and ultraviolet light at a higher speed because we wanted them to shine out really brightly when we were moving at those higher speeds. Because we wanted them to be sort of beacons while you were moving. Otherwise, it would have been pretty difficult to print them out when everything blacked out. And the infrared, well, we sort of tried to take a little bit of logical steps as to what would be warm. So, the bottom of the fence posts are warmer than the tops of the fence posts, and stuff like that. Like I think the chimneys of the houses are very high, that sort of thing. And those decisions were mostly made on a little bit of guessing and a little bit of
So, sorry, I actually wanted Ryan to stop around 65 works actually. So
okay.
you can get to about 65 because I want to show searchlight.
Okay.
Apparently when the air is played, the sound is kind of off.
The sound is off.
Or it's like not very...
Oh, is your bitrate correct?
Let me just check one setting here. Capture audio should be off. You know what? I'm going to just turn off the game audio. That people probably want to hear the talking more than the game audio, but although we'll get to game audio. So yeah, the infrared. We it's an intelligent thing. It's like we wanted the mushrooms. There aren't that many sources of ultraviolet other than the sun.
Wait, there's no sound right now.
No, it's the movement of the technical processing. The actual process. Okay, right.
Let's try restarting the game another way.
Oh, okay, the whole game.
Back up about the story. Some of the comments online about the game were it's such a scientific topic, yet it has such a
totally the processing.
It's
taking up too much processing.
Okay, all right. We're trying a lower resolution now.
Would you like me to run on my computer instead? So it'll be slightly more choppier, but
Sure, give it a shot.
yeah.
it's a scientific concept of a very spiritual story. Was that on purpose or just coincidence?
So one thing that
play full screen.
we kind of had to work with was the constraints of our engine, and a few of those really just had to do with the amount of information we can keep track of when it came to tracking objects in the 3D space. So for physics reasons and for computational reasons, for example, the other characters that you see in the world, they can't move in any other way than a straight line. And they can't change direction once they're visible on screen, otherwise things would not go well in the engine. So now we've got a world in which other characters can't acknowledge your existence. They can't respond to you. You also, we discussed the controls had to have this really floaty inertial feel because we were modeling some of the kinetic effects that happen when you're traveling close to the speed of light. So you're floating around, nobody else can notice you or respond to you in any way. It started seeming to us like, a character who would have to operate according to those rules would be a ghost. That's somebody who floats around, that's somebody who nobody else can see. And we started sort of working through that idea of a spirit or a ghost, and okay, what's their motivation? Why are they in this condition? What are they doing in this world? And the story kind of came organically from there, but I would imagine if the engine, didn't have those constraints, the story might have looked very different.
There were also a couple other things that built on top of that too once that was set in motion. It was supposed to be human scale, and since these figures were going at a constant speed, how can you do that without showing the rotation of their feet? Robes. So I mean that added to the spirituality thing, and then also we had scratch sound that was really jarring, and just the visuals were really jarring in itself, and so this kind of soothing sound really also pushed the spiritual aspect of the game. So it's like it just like layered on top of itself basically.
So yeah, we did a couple of iterations on the story. Things like just trying to get the visuals to match up with the text, in a way that complemented each other. And I'm trying to think of what other.
We changed it to night.
Nighttime.
Yeah.
That was new.
Actually, really late in the development process. That was kind of exciting to see that happen in the last 2 weeks.
You just redid all the assets. Nighttime also explains why there isn't like UV light everywhere, right? Because there's no sun, and why the world is a relatively cool world that's not like infrared bouncing off everything.
Yeah. So part of it is just that we were kind of lazy on the.
Right, telling the truth.
Like lazy in the sense that we didn't have the processing power to do what we would like to do. Like the true way we should evolve this is we should have had a spectral response curve for every object in the game. Every texture we shouldn't have had textures. We should have had spectral response curves for every pixel. But that's a lot of data, and our graphics cards can't really handle that either. So what we do is we just have to pick a color, or pick a primary wavelength, and then that's what we use to represent everything. So everything is a primary wavelength, and some of them get a lower one, and some of them get a higher one, and they all have intensities as well.
So get to about 65 when the searchlight starts showing up. This is something else that the game engine does, that's documented, and that's the searchlight effect, where when you get closer to the speed of light, the perceived intensity of light in the direction that you're traveling appears to be higher, and vice versa from the direction that you're walking away from, it gets kind of darker and dimmer. So in addition to colors moving in and out of the visible spectrum, you also have this like change of intensity. What I don't see a lot of people doing, and this is this pro tip for people trying to speedrun this game, because the intensity comes in the direction that you're moving, it's actually a really, really good way to figure out what direction your character is moving versus what direction your character is pointing at. So if you're walking sideways, for instance, and right now Zach is doing a bit of an S curve, and that shows that's a really, really clear indicator of that's where you're going to end up in a couple of seconds, and that can prevent you from, say, accidentally glancing off an obstacle and losing velocity, and it can make the difference between narrowly missing one of the orbs and actually picking up the orbs.
Yeah. So something on the spotlight effect that you might notice is that in a lot of the other ones, you kind of see this whiteness on the screen.
Other simulations
of special relativity.
Right.
And this is because I believe what they do is they just add a filter on top of it, and they just like make everything more white. What we do in our calculations, we actually just increase the intensity of every frequency, and then I couldn't find sources to figure out like at what point do you have enough red that things start to look white. Like maybe a house is like red right now, but it's a really, really bright red, and like your intuition tells you that something gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Eventually, it just becomes white, but we don't actually know when that happens. So everything just gets really, really saturated in a spotlight effect right now.
Yeah, our version of things get really bright is things get really deeply colored.
Yeah.
Not things approach white.
We have a very high intensity.
And anyone who's worked with like high dynamic range graphics in games knows about the bloom effects that you sometimes get when when some things are perceived to be really, really, really bright. You start seeing things like a glow around them, and then they desaturate and become whiter to give you the impression that's what's happening. That's actually a film effect. That's something that comes from the way how film works, and it's more of a creative decision that's how some game engines decide to represent incredibly intense brightness, as opposed to say something that's scientifically proven.
Yeah, and of course, if we could get research, then we would just put it in, but we just don't have data on that.
Okay.
Help me out here. Anyone see the last one?
Anyone see the last orb?
Oh my gosh.
I think Ryan did this.
Oh, that's
Here's
good.
another pro tip. If you're ever in this situation, going backwards makes them light up. But they also have to be in your field of view.
Well, the thing is that it works for some ranges, but because they're defined not by a like plateau or something, like for some ranges, going backwards will help, but for the maximum, I think it just doesn't. I think they just become black.
It's entirely possible. I know that so the way it works is basically we have a grayscale image for the textures in UV and IR, and it takes things that are close to black in UV are like low wavelength.
Yeah, some number of it.
And
I didn't know you could run through that.
yeah, that's
Shortcut.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
the
So
shortcut
that must
we
be
built
why
in.
I'm not
Yes.
the best.
I did find that eBay was a much more
There we go.
benevolent level designer than me. I was always making little cul-de-sacs that eBay would put a friendly shortcut in there. And like, oh,
Can you
why
guys
do
talk
want
about
this
why
to
you-
players?
But I hid it. No one knows about it.
That's true.
Why in
it's
this
fine.
part that you turned off all the other effects?
So, Garrett Kortemeyer, the guy who brought this to us, our product owner, he really originally wanted us to show this, which is the Lorentz contraction, and sort of the geometric effects of traveling near the speed of light. He actually thought that these were going to be the effects that overpowered what would happen. He thought that this would be what you're seeing, but as anyone who's played the game knows, you don't really notice it all that much because you're a little bit busy staring at all the bright colors that are coming at you. So when we were playing around with this, he sort of asked us if we could build something in so that we could show off the geometric effects, so that we could let people know that this is actually going on, and this is another like entirely real physical effect of traveling near the speed of light. What that sort of resulted in was we were trying to figure out, okay, well, how can we just take this away at random? And so when you collect all 100 orbs as sort of a bonus, we let you travel as close to the speed of light as physically possible. And we turned off the color effects just because it's a little bit interesting to watch.
What would this look like with the color effects? Would it just be?
Pretty much like the end of the game looks. Maybe a little bit. It would actually probably wash out some of the colors
I
because
think you just like couldn't see anything.
It usually when we would run the game and have it be that you could travel very near the speed of light. The problem is that all the colors suddenly, they shift up in wavelength due to the Doppler shift and suddenly become, say, gamma rays or something like that, which is wonderful for, say, irradiating your body, but not so wonderful for a visual effect. And that's kind of just a problem with how we don't have enough processing power to have a full spectrum of wavelength on every object.
And that's the real reason why you get nauseous. It's not actually motion sickness, it's radiation poisoning.
Another reason is like the curve that for all the special relativity effects, it grows much faster near right next to the speed of light. So the effects of the color just get so much worse.
Okay, so shall I finish this up?
So there was a question on the chat, which was who's lab champ for this game?
Yeah.
I think that would be Ryan.
Yes.
But it was on an earlier build.
No. This was the final build.
No, it was, on the earlier build,
On
I
earlier
was
build,
the
Zach
champ,
was the
and he could
champion.
never beat me. And then I went to go do QA, and he changed the way movement worked in the game, and then beat me because he had an extra week to play the game. So
So what was your final?
I'm not saying he cheated, but he might have cheated.
But the final version might not have been what it was if Ryan had won the first time.
Maybe a little bit.
So what was your final time?
325 or
235.
235.
235.
Oh dear, that's unfortunate, isn't it? And my computers appear to have just died.
Did you plug it into power?
Yeah, it probably overheated.
Oh.
Computer is unfortunately breaking.
Okay.
So
So
as a quick thing, as you saw at the end there was world time and your time, which I'm assuming is something that not everyone picked up on, as to why that was something different. And the reason is that we have, when you're traveling near the speed of light, time starts to move differently for you. So your time is the time that you would have experienced. If you were wearing a watch, that's what it would say. But if we left the watch on a rock and let it play out for the time that you were playing that game, it would say what the world time says, which would be a little bit different just because traveling at the speed of light means time passes differently for those who are moving near the speed of light than for those who are, say, at rest with respect to computers.
Oh,
Yeah, that's as good as Mac gets.
Is that called the, is that the time track?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were actually planning to use like the time dilation effects in the game, but that never came to be.
Well, we had real trouble representing clocks in the world.
Representing clocks and changing objects over time was hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Because animations had to be
Linear,
constant
velocity.
They had to be back traceable
Right.
very easily.
There was actually a really great suggestion on one of the first Let's Plays that got put up for the game. Somebody said, why not put rain in there? I'd love to see a version of that.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the processing power?
The wisdom of the internet.
Zach's computer will be emanating.
It would be on fire right now, but I'd love to see what that looked like.
So, any questions from the group, from the folks in the room?
When you accelerate, the headlight effect works backward, and things move away from you when you accelerate. I didn't see that.
Oh, so the way how things move backwards is more obvious once we turn off the color effects. It's more obvious while you're accelerating, but you hit maximum speed within
A few seconds.
A second. Say like 2 seconds.
Yeah. So things don't move backwards. Things can't move backwards in time because that like violates causality. But what they do is they just get slower. So it's a little bit hard to see them moving backwards.
You talked about the headlight effect, which means things come at you at a different angle, and when you start up, the headlight effect means that things appear to move away because they're confined in a headlight, no reality and what they seem like. I did this 25 years ago with a PDP-7 and some programmers from Lawrence Lab, and it's just stick figures. There was no.
So that does happen as you accelerate. But so within the first about 2 seconds of going forward, things seem to get much further away from you. But then you'll hit your maximum speed, and then you're not really accelerating anymore.
No, that's true. Then they come by you.
Yeah.
That's really easy to see at the
If
end
you
when
look at the end, then you can see that pretty easily.
Okay.
Also, I can demonstrate that if this stops melting. I have
You could like
the
computer,
put it on
like
the book or
computer one
something.
is pretty easy.
I also have the OpenRelativity.
Oh yeah, OpenRelativity might be a good example. I mean, I can sort of show it. Let me just try this again at a really low resolution and see whether I can get this to work.
Oh god.
Let me see if I can get this to work. This might kill the audio. I'm sorry, folks who are watching on the stream. But I have turned down the complexity of the scene, so it should. I find that actually you don't actually have to like ambient the analogy to see. In fact, that's something that usually throws people even before they've noticed any of the color effects. They start noticing this kind of almost like a Hitchcock lens effect, you know, where as you go forward, this is normal, right? You move forward and the world goes towards you. I picked up a bunch of these. I think round about 24 of these. And now, okay, I'm at a standstill. I'm going forward. And there was a brief little bump there. Yeah, that was with the so it becomes a little backward. Well, the thing is that if I go backwards and forwards, people don't know which key, so they don't necessarily. Stationary, going forward.
I'd say like 50 minutes.
Yeah, of course. As the more you get,
the whole stream.
come
back up. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. That's just this computer is not capable of running the stream and playing the game at the same time. I'm really sorry about that.
One thing that is really cool about watching players play it on YouTube is that there's a moment where a lot of people realize, wait a second, if I stop and just stand at a standstill, nothing looks different. It's not the world is actually changing in and of itself every time you pick up the orb. You can stop and it'll go back to looking exactly like it looked at 0 orbs, and that's kind of a neat moment, because I think there's something about the inertia of collecting all of them, and the fact that, if you played it at least once, so the clock is running, people want to kind of do it as a speed run, and you do miss something if you don't literally kind of stop to smell the roses and compare what happens when you're stopped to when you're moving. And that's always cool to see that moment where they're like, oh.
But that is one thing. Say you're you're close to the speed of light is really low, and you're stopped in a standstill. The world looks identical to where it was at the beginning, but there are these NPCs. There are these characters. Oh, okay.
In case you want to run out of your
to running off my laptop. Well, it's the same thing as running off yours. It's the same effect. But the thing is, there are NPCs walking. And they're also not that far off from the speed of light, right? So are they also warping? Like they should be looking a little bit different.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, it's just kind of subtle.
Actually, when you bring the speed of light way down, you can see them distorting.
You can see
as
them.
they move.
Yeah, they kind
And
of
red and blue shifting a little.
look a little bit.
And actually,
they do squash, right?
what's really funny is if they're moving away from you, they actually start to black out, and so everything else around them is in the normal color saturation. But since they're moving away, the intensity goes down.
Yeah.
So they have the spotlight effect on the photons that they're actually sending out, which is kind of cool.
And at lower at higher speeds of light, when it's closer to what you expect in reality, you can see the redshift and the blue shift as if they were galaxies, right, moving away from. So that does happen. Trying to see what other questions we've had. Have you heard of Kurt J. Mack? I heard of this through him. He was one of our first Let's Play people, so that was great.
Watch that.
Here's a question. What made you decide to use vertex-based Terrell rotations as opposed to real-time relativity, which is an Australian special relativity simulator? So we use
Terrell?
vertex. Huh?
Can you Google Terrell?
I think that's just the effect of when you go past. If I'm not mistaken, it's when you go past the when you get really close to the speed of light, you get to see the edges of objects that you wouldn't normally have been able to see if you were standing still and in exactly the same point.
Okay.
So
wait.
things appear to rotate.
All right. Now, what's the question?
So the question is, why did we go with this instead of doing some sort of pixel-based transform? Which I think just largely comes down to why did we do vertex transformations instead of pixel transformations? I'm not sure how you do a pixel transformation.
I don't know how you do a pixel transformation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data.
You could do a ray trace from every single pixel to figure out where you hit. But I don't actually think that's how real-time relativity does.
The
Exactly
idea of
as
using a
much as
pixel-based transformation is weird because you need to know for every pixel, what your velocity is relative to that pixel. And I assume they're talking about fragments, which is like...
Oh yeah, okay, fragments, yeah, that makes
fragments, not pixels, but because you can't do anything on a single pixel. And the reason we use vertex operations instead of doing it like per fragment is because it's faster. That was the only reason.
Speed.
Speed.
Yeah. Yeah, and that becomes really obvious right at the end of the game after your 100 pickup, and then everything's warping so dramatically that you can actually see the polygons, the edges of the polygons that we have, that we have in the world. So like the normally completely straight pillars, you can actually see where each joint is, and that's because we're doing vertex.
Yeah, and that itself was a huge boost from when we were doing all the computation in the CPU instead of on the graphics card.
Right.
So, as far as digits.
Yeah, I don't know if we're fully answering the question that well, but I'm trying to figure out we didn't actually look at see what real-time relativity did.
Yeah.
So we might have said something stupid there. I don't know.
Yeah, we're not quite sure how real-time relativity accomplishes its goal.
Yeah.
You want to show off open relativity?
Sure, I can do that. Or we can show, yeah.
Just switch the camera around. This is OpenRelativity.
Okay, so this is the Unity project of OpenRelativity, which is what we're calling the open source version of the code that went into a slower speed of light. So with this stuff, basically you can drop in your own objects, your own things, make your own game based around the rules of relativity that we've given you. So this has all the same constraints, all the same abilities that our code in a slower speed of light has. We've stripped out all the things we can't give you, like eBay's art assets, and basically just made it into something that hopefully will provide the bare bones for people to kind of go crazy with this other stuff. So I guess I'll show a little bit of what you can do, of what you can just see with this. And so I made everything just simple bright colors, and if you look back you can see all the things. As you see on the cubes, rather than actually having a texture in the IR or UV spectrums, I just have a texture that says IR spectrum. Just letting you know that, yes, that's what you're seeing at the moment. And if you click a couple buttons, you can change what the speed of light is, you can make the effects less dramatic, more dramatic, and with another button press, you remove the color, and if I bring this really far down, you can start to see the Lorentz transformation, and that right there is what someone was asking about earlier, which is the sort of apparent moving away of objects as you move towards them at high speeds of light.
Oh, you were just going forward there.
Yes, I was going forward right there, which may have seemed a little strange because everything seemed to pull back, but that's actually what it looks like.
Yeah.
And if you look closely, sorry, the objects are all textured sort of the same, so you can't tell this too closely, but the rotation that they were asking about, the terrestrial rotation, is where you can actually see sort of the backside of an object even though you're moving towards it. And you can almost get that in right here. You can see the, oops, that may have been a Unity error. You can see almost the backside of an object as you travel towards it. It's a little harder to tell because these are just basic Unity primitives. I didn't want to do anything fancy. I wanted to make it as reasonable as possible for anyone to use this. And that's the basics of it. And in order to make something in that appeals, that follows our rules, you just add a new object, you attach this script and a rigid body. Make sure to turn off gravity because we don't have gravity here. And a couple of physics things that just make it easier on me.
This will all be in the documentation.
Yes, this will be very clearly written out. And oh, and I forgot the shader, but this will show the Lorentz contraction on it. It's a sphere though, however.
Oh, it's a sphere. Yeah.
Silly choices on my part.
So
Spheres.
the spheres always have the silhouette of a circle, no matter how close you are to the speed of light and what velocity you're moving. As long as they're in your field of view, they will look like a circle. That's not to say that there isn't a transformation. If you got like a really large sphere, and you were moving, say, sort of tangentially past it, you should see the textures on it warp. But if you just look at the edges of it, it should still look like a sphere, or as much of the sphere that you can capture in your camera at any time.
That's actually why we decided to collect orbs instead of anything else. For very reason.
They don't change.
Yeah.
Oh, I can finally answer that pixel question. All right, so I actually went and figured out what they're doing. So the reason
in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. So what they do is every pixel is associated with their position and like the speed at which the thing came from or something. So they have enough information like per pixel. You can do everything on a per pixel per photon basis, right? But what that makes it hard to do is the movement of objects, which is what we do, because it renders everything to a 2D plane with this information, and then it does everything. So doing things like having objects that move and then go back in time is hard with that, because you just don't have the information when you're in the pixel. Like you can't figure out whether things should be behind other things or not when you go back and do the transformations on the pixels.
And sort of to demonstrate what he's talking about, just like the moving characters in the game itself, here you can actually have access to that too. Third-party moving objects work just like they do in the game, and you can see right there the Doppler effect on the moving object as it moves towards and past you. So that all is also accessible to you. Anything that you can do in a slower speed of light, anything that you see will be accessible in this, and I'll be releasing this hopefully in the next few days, as long as my comments don't kill me.
Let me read the documentation first.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Question from the audience. What about third dimension?
How about third dimension?
Will you be able to jump?
Yes.
Yes and no. So jump is
So-
a different question.
So the reason it's not in the game right now is because when you jump, that implies that there's gravity, and if we imply that there's gravity, we also imply that we should probably be correctly simulating gravity under special relativity, and we don't do that. So we didn't-
That's general relativity.
or general relativity,
Yeah.
whatever. And we don't do that. So yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't want it to be inaccurate.
However, three-dimensional movement will be implemented in the final product of Open Relativity. It's actually kind of there in the code. We just sort of silenced it because we didn't want you moving off the ground when you were playing a slower speed of light. Jumping is sort of something you can add, however, it'd be a bit of lying because, like Ryan and Phil said, we don't actually simulate general relativity. So
And if anyone out there wants to make a space sim and play fast and loose with the gravitational fields of massive bodies, you're welcome to do that now.
Yeah.
Related question that we were getting a lot is multiplayer. What would it take?
Oh,
Is it possible?
Every physicist
It's
has
possible.
this explode.
I think it's actually possible, because you have. It's not that hard as long as the player has no animations. Or I mean, like, when I say not that hard, I mean it's doable, because you do have a map of what every player has done.
You have to record what every single player has done.
Yeah, but it's only
From
two.
the beginning
It's only
on.
two things. So you have to track their movement and what they've done,
Mhm.
and then two players won't be in sync, like they're sitting next to each other. They'll see different things, but you can't correctly simulate it for each player.
So the easiest thing would be like a multiplayer game in which you're not playing at the same time. Maybe I do something and then you do something separately.
Yeah, yeah.
Having
that's
the knowledge
yeah.
of it.
if you're asking, say, can we make Halo but with special relativity, I don't want to simulate that many bullets, but perhaps someone with a supercomputer at CERN could maybe do it. I don't think I could.
I think racing games what came up a lot, right? It's like, you know, just having one other player who's trying to who's not exactly in the same position as you.
In the realm of kind of head-to-head simultaneous play, actually, Max Payne 3 was dealing with some of the same issues in a much more cartoonish, less physically accurate.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not physically accurate at all. I don't know. In a different way, but I think they were dealing with the kind of since only one player really has the power to reshape where other people are, how they're moving, it needs to be a power-up. There needs to be, you know, even if play is synchronous, the ability to move at relativistic speeds is easier dealt with for all parties involved if it's kind of an asynchronous power-up.
Only one person can have at a time.
Yeah.
You can see that. That is well in the realm of game design rather than physics, right?
Exactly.
It's like how do you make it fun rather than and playable rather than how do you accurately simulate?
Yeah. Another problem with Halo would be animations are nearly impossible because you have, like, if one hand does one thing, the other hand does one thing, you might have to backtrack them different amounts in time.
Right, yeah.
Because the one hand will be different distance away from the other hand, so you can't just play the animation backwards. You actually have to play part of one hand back a certain amount, and the other hand back a certain amount. And it's not discrete either. It's just.
I think we had this discussion once at the beginning of deciding what the game was going to be, which is that if you spun in a circle at relativistic speeds, different sections of you would age at different rates, which would be a little disturbing and also very hard to simulate.
Yeah.
So there's
How
that
will we even
problem.
show that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Eva, there's a good reason our character doesn't have limbs, right?
Yeah.
That's a good reason why you don't see the character at all.
Yes.
Are you looking forward toward addiction?
Towards what?
That is, I made it to the 5th level, I'm going to spend all night making it to the 6th level. I mean, isn't that what games are for?
Not all games, right? You know, that's what certain game designers strive for, and usually that's because that's part of their business model. Especially games that encourage you to keep putting money into it while you're playing the game, like either the arcade games of old or the social games of today, or the free-to-play, the freemium games of today. That's not kind of what we were going for. Ours was our game's a little bit more on the. We'd much rather a physics teacher bring this to a high school classroom or something, have all the students play this for about 5 minutes, because that's about as long as it takes to complete our game. And if they never have to play the game again, but they understand the concepts behind it, we're done. Special relativity is hard enough to teach.
I think you have to be masochist to play this game all night.
Actually, there was one interesting kind of subculture of discussion that I stumbled on the internet, where a forum of users of Oculus Rift, which is this immersive 3D VR headset. They are waiting with bated breath for OpenRelativity to be released, and I'm not sure what they have in mind
makes
for
my
it.
head hurt so much.
Yeah,
I have one of those at work.
So it wasn't bad enough on the screen to strap something onto your eyes. But I could see that, I mean, whatever it is, it's going to be profoundly disorienting and maybe addictive for those sorts of people. I don't know what the draw is, but they seem excited.
Well, you spoke of 5 minutes, but there are about 8 different things going on here, each of which takes a week to really understand, or if you're doing the equations, it certainly does. And so I think it's a richer, I mean, this is the beginning, I understand that, but there's a very rich experience there, and I'm trying to find a way to, maybe addiction is the wrong goal, but
engagement.
But engagement, and you want satisfaction when you're done. My goodness, I never thought of that. And so,
one of the things we had bounced around ideas of how this could be a stronger pedagogical tool. One of the ideas that we bounced around was like a pop-up video mode or something, where as each effect kicked in, text comes up and tells you this is what's happening, but you know, we didn't have time to implement anything like that.
We considered like introducing effects one at a time to try to show like what they each do and try to break it down more, but we just didn't have time.
But real-time relativity, again, the Australian game actually does let you individually toggle each one of these effects.
Yeah.
So that's another way that this game engine can
very
be used.
technically, our game, you can do that too if you have the Unity editor.
Yeah. And in fact, the game engine running in Unity editor is also close to one of Gert's original ideas, which was to allow students to create their own experiments. So I think the game that we created is kind of an introduction to the concepts. And if you really want to take this far, you start creating your own experiments in Unity, which is, the version you're using is the free version, right? It's the indie version. Yeah, so you download our, it runs on the free version of Unity as well. Yeah, so a school teacher could, if they had the computers to run it, could bring the technology and ask students to basically create little games of their own using the same technology. And then we can do things like falling into pits that are different sizes depending on your speed, or garages.
We are actually keeping track of like time for every object. So we can do things like the garage door, paradox, or
every one of those NPCs has its own time.
Yeah, everything has their own time.
Also, I would think that there could be, I think you mentioned it, but it went by fast, there could be interludes of pre-programmed stuff in which the interactivity is discontinued for a while, and that allows you to do it in much more detail, I would think. I mean, because this is under the user's control, you lose some of the richness that might, I'm not talking about, I mean, sooner or later, I don't know the difference between, I don't know what I'm talking about, except that there's a place for pre-programmed, very rich, highly detailed things, and also in player initiative.
In fact, something which I can imagine a physics teacher doing with this code is creating, is setting up an experiment, a simulation of what something would look like, and running through it multiple times with different parameters. And it's not interactive while the simulation is running, but it'd be interactive in the sense that you could change the parameters.
That's what I mean. Yeah, right.
That's entirely feasible using technology.
It's one of the things about Unity that's not that hard to do. Like one of the drawbacks is that it's like kills your computer. But
well, you need a really powerful computer.
Yeah, you need a fairly powerful computer to play it. But at the same time, since we use Unity, anyone can really pick it up and modify it.
There's at least no cost barrier.
No cost barrier.
I'm kind of interested to see,
But
once we can release the engine and get it into the hands of other developers, I'm interested to see where things go in two ways. So one is using this as a teaching tool for physics. Can you make a more kind of complete syllabus out of this? Could this be given greater depth as a teaching tool? But also I'm interested to see, we had the constraints of wanting to be accurate to the physics, to the way things work in real life, or at least the best theories we had. I'm curious to see what happens when teams get their hands on this that have no obligation to be kind of faithful to physics, but are instead using these effects in completely expressionistic ways. I'm just as interested to see that as I am to see, if physics teachers are making tests or making experiments out of this. I think they'll both be interesting to see how they turn out.
Yeah, we're not quite sure what they're going to use this game engine for, or what anyone's going to use for this game engine for. I hope people let us know, so that.
Well, one thing that kept coming up was the mushrooms. Should we explain that or keep that a secret?
No. I think we should. This is
The game kind of ran through different sub-communities of various interests.
Well, basically, one of the game ideas at the beginning was that it would be like platforms. So with the time dilation, you could make the mushrooms grow, and you could stand on top of them because, what grows and you can stand on it. But then that ended up getting trashed. But the mushrooms didn't. They stayed.
Mushrooms are also nice and they grow up. It's
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
Well, artists do.
The mushrooms were chosen for game design reasons, not recreational reasons.
There was sort of no hidden agenda there.
Wink, wink.
No, it's not well hidden. It's
Let's see. There's a few other questions. Did we include other definitions of IR, like cosmic microwave background radiation, and I guess other wavelengths, or other sub-visible wavelengths, beyond UV, I think like gamma rays, right? So
we go 0 to 1400 nanometers, maybe.
in wavelengths.
Someone can look at the source code.
Yeah, so what we do is we basically, so you can, I don't know if OpenRelativity is up. So in the thing that I've got running right now, you can just see like what we have is basically a Unity shader, and you have 3 textures. And each of these textures, the first one is actually the color in normal wavelength, and then the other 2, we pretend that these are both, the grayscale basically runs from across like the spectrum of what we are calling UV wavelength, and then what we're calling IR wavelength. And so technically, if we added more textures or expanded the range of this, yes, we could add in those wavelengths, but it would require a lot more processing power and a little bit more computation. So we basically just decided that there was a certain range we were going to represent, and hope that you don't go fast enough to sort of see when those ranges disappear.
Can you show us what the textures look like? What, your sample UV and IR texture?
Sure.
Well,
I mean, my sample IR. I made this in MS Paint in about 30 seconds.
That's what I was wondering. So it's just great. It's
yeah.
on or off.
Yeah, in a slower speed of light, they're a little bit nicer. They're like grayscale versions of the actual textures, and they tend to be touched up by either Ryan or eBay, depending on. Don't worry about it. So they represented more realistically what was actually what would actually be shown in the IR or UV spectrums. I'm assuming no one has painted IR spectrum in IR Paint before, but so. It's really just like sort of an arbitrary range of wavelengths that we decided on.
You want to show a version that has Ryan's textures in it?
What?
Well,
I think also when I was doing research, those 0 to 1400 seem to be a reasonable amount of wavelength to cover, because that's how much, if those were the wavelengths that we expected to have a fairly significant effect on within the speeds that we were limiting between 0 and 100 orbs. At 100 orbs, like everything's out the window because you can go as fast as you want. But in that range, the 0 to 1400 was the most relevant. Oh yeah.
Okay, here are a couple of old builds of the game well before prime time, let's just say.
Yeah. So this was an old build where we had sort of, this city is taken from the original project that Garrett Kortemeyer took us. All the textures are free textures that we've got off of, I think, the Unity store. And this is back in a time when we had thought that we could use periodic objects with our engine. One of the cool things about this is that if I bring the speed of light really low, since the speed of light is so small and the distance is actually relatively great between me and that box, you actually are seeing the box at different points in time depending on when it's moving, hence the sort of jiggly jello effect. While this looks really nice, it turns out there were a couple problems that we ran into this, which actually we had some mushrooms that were moving up and down periodically, and what would happen is they would actually start to just warp out of existence because our equations didn't actually account for periodic motion correctly, and they would just they broke the speed of light and then would disappear, and then they would come back in. Given a little more time and maybe a physicist on the team, we could probably fix this pretty handily, but this was an effect that we really enjoyed for a short period of time. And also, this was back when we were thinking about allowing the player to create their own levels, so you could lay down crates of your own and just sort of spray them everywhere, which was fun to watch, but also sort of painful on the CPU, because this was again back when we used the CPU rather than the graphics card to do all the vertex computation. That's one of the old builds.
Yeah.
I'll deal with that in a minute. And
EST.exe. I feel like I made that
EST.exe. This is yes, you did. This is actually our first playtest. Our first playtest was a little brutal, and included quite a few. I'll call them programmer textures. So you can see clearly, unlike the very nicely designed GUI that would come on later, this was sort of made by me or Ryan in MS Paint. And
please, I use GIF.
So God.
It's also in daytime.
Yeah.
It looks kind of nice.
Got it.
Everything is really hot in this world, including the rocks, right? I mean, there's the rock faces.
There's magma in the rocks.
Yeah.
I think this will be for the flat textures then. Oh, maybe.
No, I think you made the IR.
No, I did make IR UV because the paths are warm inside.
They probably weren't corrected to reduce
Yeah.
the intensities.
Some of these obviously don't have textures, like the bubbles are missing them.
Also, you can see here that the ultraviolet spectrum actually comes out, which is not something... Oh, and right there you see one of the main problems with this, which besides it being slow, the collisions were also pretty grating, and sort of led to our decision.
We should talk about that. So, oh look, that's when transparency was in.
Yeah.
That slows the game down so much. Anyways, so we actually don't physically recreate collisions very well because they're so jarring. If you look at our game, you can like collide with objects, and the light effects don't change that rapidly, even though you stop really rapidly, because people didn't like that effect very much.
As you can see, going from bright
necessary.
colors.
That's what a collision looks like when you're accurate with your collisions.
Well.
Actually, one of the worst things about this build was that we had great testers who were committed to putting themselves through like physical discomfort to play our test build, and it was like a 10-minute experience, not very comforting.
Okay, no more.
Spoiler alert? Wait.
You'll see what they were rewarded with at the end, which let's just say they were a little bit crestfallen after giving us 10 minutes of their time. And
this is the build with the stupid scale factor equals 1 error 2.
Yep.
So we have how many more orbs we need to pick up? 3 more?
Yeah, I've got 3 more, and I think they're the hard to see ones. Also, you can see at this point, we weren't so good with the color saturation.
No,
so
this was using...
This was using the wrong scattering effect, right?
This was using... Oh, this was before we actually did true transformations on the frequencies. This was
Yeah,
back when
this
we.
is RGB.
This was when we took. Our initial idea was that we would take RGB, turn it to HSV, and then do a hue shift that approximately correspond to a frequency shift, and then use that.
Right, you were just changing the H of the HSV.
So feel free to shout out from the audience if you happen to spot one of these things. This was back when we had transparent orbs that were very heavily dyed in the IR spectrum. So when you're moving, you're supposed to be able to see them. But as you can see, cotton candy is not really a great background to try and spot something.
Oh, that's an
Okay,
error.
that's one.
Yeah, you've got two more.
There's
Just
one.
the Looney Tunes effect is a lot more.
The thing is, the
pronounced.
buildup is just so.
Let's see.
By the way, because we don't do things on the vertex, you can actually run this at any resolution. You get about the same frame rate.
Yeah. Oh God.
This is another thing we found in this early build.
Just finding up the detective work of finding an orb was nowhere nearly as fun as freely moving at near the speed of light.
Okay.
So
There's one right in front of you
yeah.
too.
Yeah, I took it.
No, there's another one inside that fence area.
Oh, inside the fence area?
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's right next to the rock.
Okay, and this...
Nope, you're missing.
What?
Now at this moment you really want to get a nice reward, a nice pat on the back. You're giving your time to this.
Oh, am I wrong?
No, that's it.
No, that's it.
I'm just stuck in a rock because...
Oh, right, our collision at this point.
And They told me we needed a win state, so I made a win state. And Matt Weiss has never forgiven me.
Yeah, that's right. He was mad.
So,
You just move on your own now?
yep.
The
that-
acceleration's really slow in this game, in this version of the game. So even if you if you take all your hands off, it takes
well,
quite a
until
bit.
you hit the fence.
Until you hit the fence, right? And then you just come to a dead stop.
So one of the things that we found was, we wanted more orbs to make it less of a detective game of hunting for the orbs and finding them. And we ended up, thinking maybe 50 is a good number. We ended up with 100 because we actually found that having these kind of implicit paths that players were encouraged to follow throughout the level, just, even if you lost the thread of one path, you could pick up another and you would have the same kind of flow of experience. I think it's still the case that there's a little bit of detective work at the end in the last 30 to 60 seconds of the experience. But it's certainly not what we just saw. I think we accomplished a nice sense of flow in the level design and orb placement.
Did you ever think about breaking it up so for example, a lot of people on the Let's Play videos never lift their hands from the arrow keys, so they never get to experience a lot of the effects that you see when you go from being motionless to approaching the speed of light. Is that something you change now that you've seen how so many people have played it, or?
We actually, so we were thinking of laying out the level in a more linear fashion instead of having kind of a big open area surrounded by cliffs. Actually, having the cliffs construct sort of a canyon path that the player would go through, and that would have been a more kind of sequential experience that we would have had more control over the pacing in terms of here's a line of orbs and now here's a place where you're encouraged to stop and look around. We, for different reasons, chose to go with the more open level just because we realized that it would be a kind of repetitive experience if it was purely this sequential kind of jog down a canyon path. So we ended up going for the more open level, but then you do cede control and it's kind of up to the player to pace themselves. And I think there is just something about the more of a gamer you are, the more you want to beat the high score. And that to me just glues your finger to the arrow keys. And I find I have to even remind myself to kind of stop and smell the roses every once in a while. I want that high score.
What's the range of the speed of light in the game right now? Well, your walking speed is 5 meters per
8,
second.
actually.
8
because of the little boost effect that we put in there.
So it starts at 5, but if you pick up orbs continuously, you might get up to 8.
Yeah. So the final moment when you're driving around with the color shift off, you're actually going at 8. Or you can get up to 8, and 8 is the speed of light. So you can sort of reach 8, but not really because speed of light.
Pretty darn close.
But at the beginning, I think it's something ridiculous like 1200, and then we have a logarithmic function that causes it to go like that. So
1200 meters per second, which is vastly slower than speed of light.
Yeah. But it's something where it's not actually visible to you moving around until you start picking up orbs. Yeah.
What surprised you guys about the reaction or how people played the game or what they took away from the game?
surprised people tweeted about it.
That tweet button served us well.
Yeah, that was like the last few days.
Yeah. I think we'd already submitted a gold build and then submitted another gold build with the tweet button attached, which I'm happy we did.
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised that people found it like pleasant. You know, I actually had 3 of the QA team refuse to test this game because it made them sick. So most of the time, I would get on, I would finish the level in like under 3 minutes, and then I'd hand it to them to test all the menus and everything, because they refused to actually play the part of the game where you could throw up. So
you can throw up at any part of the game.
People spent like a long time playing this game on their Let's Plays too.
Yeah.
I was like, you should have gone sick. You haven't played this game over and over and over.
Anything surprising?
Mostly there were 3 different kinds of people, like reactions. One was like the science side. Another was like the gamer side, like, oh, this game was so short, there's only 1 level, and then the other one was like, trippy shrooms. I know, right?
I actually found that the kind of question of, is this a game, it's so short, is this what you would call a full game experience, or is it kind of a software experiment? I found that really interesting because I found that we were kind of sparking these discussions among communities that seem to be working through these issues really for the first time, and I was really proud of that. That, you know, we lobbed this thing out there, and gamers embraced it, and it actually made them start to have these discussions that were questioning what's a game, what isn't. But the thing that I noticed was, you know, for a lot of people to even be having that discussion, they had to recognize it as a game-like object and think, I should download that, I should play it, that looks cool. Let's see if my computer can run that. So, you know, in a way, and then
unfortunately,
they would, yeah, exactly. Maybe sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it was interesting to hear folks having those debates because in academic game studies departments, we talk about that a lot. It was really cool to hear kind of gamers out in the wild talking about it. And I heard some really smart theories about it too.
The thing that surprised me is how similar some of the Let's Plays are. They're like down to the path that they take through the entire space are surprisingly consistent.
Well, never showed you the optimal path. That was real dumb of me, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What's with going to those trees?
There's like a certain optimal path that you can follow through that allows you to get it in, like, fairly quick. Don't give me that.
You can't do like I have the high score and then have
Could have,
like
like,
secrets.
There's no optimal path. The rumors are not true. No, there is.
So I think we can probably wrap up here, at least wrap up the stream. The last question that we have is, what will we have to make up to show what happens when you reach or exceed the speed of light?
That's not possible.
We had to make up a lot.
Wait, we don't reach the speed of light.
No, it's when given open relativity, what would game developers have to do in order to like how much are they making up when they go past or at the speed of light? And the answer is everything.
They're guessing at a point.
Like, our equation just we'll like divide by 0 and then the game will crash.
Our engine will crash.
I mean, maybe this gets to that point about using the engine expressively. Physicists don't know what happens when you reach the speed of light. So if you as a game developer really want to make a game where you do, and you explore what happens afterwards, we've given you a decently large vocabulary of kind of physical effects to play with. You decide what it looks like.
Make it pretty.
Yeah, make it pretty.
I guess if you just did the limit, you just think this thing's completely white, and
yeah, it'll be really bright.
Yeah, actually, we can do that. I can make that in 3 minutes.
Here's MS Paint.
Artist extraordinaire.
You can run it. You can run it in Photoshop too.
Any more questions from the room?
I know I asked this before we were streaming, but did anyone actually vomit?
Did anyone actually throw up?
We had at least 3 testers leave the room. I think if they hadn't, they might have.
I have had a couple in the QA lab when we were doing gold testing for this. A few of the QAs just pushed it away and said, if I play this anymore, I will vomit. And I believed them very, very sincerely. So.
Especially since you're probably right next to them.
Yeah. So I was okay with them maybe not testing our game all the time.
We're all smiling about it, so sadistic.
We tried our best.
I've played this game like a million times.
It's kind of a point of pride. We made a game that kind of like reaches inside you and.
Only game that uses that.
That's a
Seizure
good
motion sickness for me. There we go.
No, we're not the only game that does that, but the only game where it's really needed. Thank you very much. And thanks to the people watching on the stream.